Hi, I'm Peter and welcome back to History and Sabre, the channel where I talk about HEMA, history and swords. So, this is my first Q&A. A few weeks ago I asked for your questions and here we are. I got a bunch of them. I tried to sort them into different groups, topic-wise, and today we're going to answer them together. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, whatever you like, and let's spend some time together with your questions. Let's go! Okay, so this person asked me, how are you? I hope you're doing well. Where are you from? You have a different accent. What are your qualifications for HEMA? And do you know how and can enunciate yataan correctly? Okay, let's go through that. I am very well, thank you. It's very nice of you to ask. And I am from Austria, a Central European country with a variety of German as a native language, which is my native language, so I am a German speaker. About my accent, I am a native Austrian German speaker, but I think I do have a generic British accent when I speak English because that's what I trained myself to do at university. So that's where you get this kind of weird mix, I guess, of Austrian German and British English. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I'm Austrian and I try to speak with a British accent. So qualifications for HEMA, this is a tricky one because as far as I'm aware, there's not really an international standard, you know, as an instructor for instructors or for any kind of the other activities that we do in HEMA, research, whatever. So I do have a few qualifications, if you want to call them that. So I have been doing HEMA for 7 years now. I started in 2016 and I am an instructor at my club. I've been teaching since 2017, the summer of 2017, mainly Sabre, and I've also taken part in the yearly seminars specifically for instructors held by our federation, the federation of our club. And there's also a countrywide, let's say, low-level instructor certificate that's been going on for 2 years or so, 2 or 3 years. And I also did that 1 year ago, so I am a officially recognized low-level instructor, if you want to call it that, for HEMA specifically in Austria. So that's for formal qualifications, but you know, it's really hard in HEMA. There's no real official qualifications. There's no standards to compare it to internationally, really. So I don't know, take that for what you will. But that's my qualifications. Okay, here's me from the edits. I thought I'd chime in for a second and tell you that I do hold a teaching degree in English and history. So I studied history at university, which of course, initially at least, gave me an advantage of dealing with historical sources because that's something that you learn when you study history at uni. Of course, that doesn't mean that other people cannot learn this. In fact, many people in HEMA teach us that it is possible, and many people dealing with sources on the research side of things do happen to hold a degree in history as well, or similar fields at least, but many of them actually don't. And if you take it seriously, there's really nothing preventing you from learning how to deal with historical sources properly. So back to the video. Now, teaching-wise, I've also taught at a larger German-speaking event. I'm also going to teach at 2 international events, hopefully next year. And yeah, I hope to see you there. And this is my qualifications. And the final question for this first viewer is, do you know how and can enunciate yataan correctly? So the yataan is a short, curved sword, or saber, if you will. It's typical of the Ottoman geographical area, also up into the Balkans. It was mainly used from the 16th century onwards, I believe, and is specific to that geographic area. And as far as I'm aware, the diacritic, the little half circle on top of the G in Turkish, makes the G a silent letter. So I believe it's pronounced somewhat like yataan, but I'm not sure. That's as close as I can get, probably. I hope that's fine. You'll correct me otherwise in the comments, I know. So yeah, let's move on. So this second viewer asked me the following questions. In addition to the saber, what other weapons do you use for HEMA? How long have you been practicing HEMA? Have you ever heard of tried Bohurt? What do you think of double saber fencing? Nice channel, bro. Greetings from Campo de la Calatrava, Spain. All right, greetings back from Graz, Austria. And yeah, your first question, in addition to the saber, what other weapons do I use? As many people do, I got into HEMA for the longsword. Nothing unusual here. I did that for 1 semester, so about 6 months exclusively. Then I branched out into Sabre, which is what I mainly do now. But I did train longsword for about 2 years, quite seriously, before my focus shifted to Sabre, mainly Sabre. I also dabble in small sword. I like to find other people at events for small sword fencing. I really enjoy that. There's a few people at my club interested in it as well. So I've never formally trained it, but it's kind of cool if you're a saber fencer to train your thrusting techniques and look into the manuals that are kind of similar. So the footwork is similar. So I really enjoy small sword fencing for what it is. And I've also dabbled in a few other ones, but nothing too serious. So I'm not going to say I train those weapons when in fact I don't. So how long have I been practicing HEMA? Again, I said it before, since 2016, so it's going on, no, it's over 7 years now. And as life goes, there have been more intense periods of training and some that I practice very little. I think that's perfectly normal. You know, life gets in the way sometimes, but I have been constantly doing some kind of HEMA training over that period. So about Bohurt, yes, of course, I've heard of it. So for those who don't know, it's a full contact armored combat sport. And I have heard of it, I've seen it. It's not really my thing without having anything against it. I think it's really cool, it's really athletic, it's really impressive what these people are able to do. It's not really my thing. So if you look at weapon-based martial arts on a spectrum from small sword fencing to Bohurt, because I think it's right over there, I fit more into the small sword category, if you know what I mean. That doesn't mean that I don't have an interest in armored fencing. So I am interested in harnisch fechten, and I've looked into that over the past 1.5 years maybe, just for my personal interest together with a clubmate. But it's nothing that I will ever primarily do. So yes, I've heard of Bohurt, I think it's cool, but it's not really my thing. Also, what do I think of double saber fencing? I'm not sure if I understood that question correctly, but I'm going to assume you mean double wielding, so 1 saber in each hand. I've never tried it, to be honest. I've seen some people on Instagram doing really impressive stuff with dual wielding drills and choreographies almost. And I also really like what people are doing in the lightsaber scene, so saber spinning, all that kind of stuff. Because, you know, the classic movements of saber fencing that are written in our manuals is something that we see in lightsaber spinning as well. So the moulinets, how they are done, it's kind of cool to watch how people can learn that level of coordination, you know, wielding 2 lightsabers or a saber staff with a saber. It's really cool. But for martial arts, for fencing, in its purest form, I've never tried double wielding. I think you could count something like saber fencing with a parrying tool, such as a buckler or a pistol. I've done that before, but 2 weapons, 2 attack weapons, such as 2 swords at the same time, I've never done that. So yeah, let's see what the future brings. I might try that out. Okay. So the third viewer asked me a couple of things from me. I'd love some tips on how to best grow and care for a moustache like that. Right at the end of the video. How are your translations progressing? How many sabers, be it training weapons, sharps, or original replicas, do you own altogether? Okay, as I said, there's a few other moustache questions. I'll put them at the end of the video. How are your translations progressing? Okay, so I never said I'm doing a translation. What I said is I'm doing a transcription of the 1860 manual by Constantin Balassa, an Austro-Hungarian soldier officer who published a manual on bayonet fencing, a very nice method, also saber fencing and other kinds of fencing. So I really like that manual, not least for the plates. They are really good. Link in the description down below. And what I'm doing, as it's printed in black letter, I'm doing a nice looking modern Latin font transcription so everybody can read it very easily. I'm about maybe 50–60% through. And, you know, it's something that gets pushed to the bottom of my to-do list and has been for maybe a year or two. I enjoy doing it, but I hardly ever get around to doing it. I really enjoy that project for the visual aspect of it because I'm trying to recreate the original formatting and, paragraphing and all that kind of stuff from the original manual. So it's going to look like it, but it's much easier to read. And people might also want to take that and base their translation off of it. Or I might do it myself in the future at some point if somebody else doesn't. So yeah, that's how it's progressing. How many sabres do I own? Actually, I think it's probably less than you might think. I went through my sabre stash and it's about 9 or 10 at the moment, including my training blunts, 2 of those, my nylons, which are 2 or 3 or 4, 1 sharp, the Szabla Polska, that you can see on my channel as well. And right now I have about 4 or 5 antiques in the house. I keep changing them out every few months or maybe once a year. So right now I have a core collection of 4 or 5 antiques, which isn't a lot, but I try to keep that to a minimum right now. And yeah, probably about 10 sabres in the house, not including things like small swords, long swords, other kind of swords, parrying tools, muskets, pistols, you name it. But just for the sabres, it's about 10. So on to the next viewer. This person asked me, what is your preferred historical manual for sabre? A messer is just a sabre, not a question. Why are officers' sabre often straight while infantry or cavalry are often curved? What function does this serve? Thanks for awesome videos. Thanks for watching. My preferred historical manual, it's kind of an easy one. I've been called a vanilla guy for this kind of thing. I like Charles Roworth, 1798 or 1824, depending on the version, the edition. I think it's a great manual for beginners. I think it's a great manual for every level of fencing because the system that he shows is kind of based on older traditions, mixing it together with Angelo's small sword, you know. It's kind of a modernized, cohesive, kind of final version of the old broadsword sources, is what I would say, bringing it into the Napoleonic era and the 19th century. So I like the manual for what it is. You can do so much with that system, even though the basics and the fundamentals are quite quick to learn, or easy to learn for that matter. I also do enjoy some other manuals, of course. I like Waite. I do like some other Austrian manuals, for example, that I've not really trained from, but the Balassa manual is something I like. There's also, of course, the German Turnschule kind of tradition. There's French sabre, which is also quite cool, Italian sabre, Spanish sabre, Swedish sabre. But I am, at heart, a Roworth guy who is trying to branch out into German language, Austrian kind of stuff. For obvious reasons, I'm Austrian. I'm kind of interested in what has been done and what people were doing here, where I live. So yeah, but in short, it's Roworth. Now this person also says a messer is just a sabre. No, not a question. Yeah, sure. They also asked me, why are officers' sabre often straight, while infantry cavalry sabres are often curved? What purpose does this serve? Okay, about that, here's an easy overview, if you will. So the straight-bladed sword was the traditional officer's weapon and was seen as such in the infantry, for certain. And if you look at Austria, the Austrian Empire, the M1850 pattern infantry officer's sabre was the first curved sword, or sabre, that was for all infantry officers. Before that, there was a straight-bladed spadroon for the German infantry, so for the Austrian infantry officers, and a curved version for the Hungarian infantry. Now for the cavalry, it depends on, well, the class of soldier. It depends on whether they were heavy cavalry or light cavalry. So the Hussars were famously light cavalry. They had shorter slashing sabres. They were quicker weapons, lighter weapons, more agile weapons, more suited to their role as skirmishers and scouts, also good for self-defense. While the heavy cavalry palashes, so the straight-bladed heavy cavalry swords for the heavy cavalry, were just a different kind of weapon, easier to thrust with most of the time, heavier. So that's my quick and dirty explanation that I can give to you. So this viewer asked me a nice and quick question. What's your favorite saber of all time? That's a difficult one, but also I can kind of answer it. So I do like later sabers with bowl guards, certain ones. I do like that, but if I had to choose one for purely aesthetic reasons, I would go to the kind of first half of the 19th century, maybe closer to 1800, the stirrup-hilted sabers that have languettes, such as the 1796 light cavalry saber, the famous one. If you look at the 1837 infantry officer's saber in Austria, the Austrian Empire for that matter, this is kind of one I really like because it has the languettes, it has a curved blade, it has a knuckle bow that flares out here, so it's wider at the base where the pommel is, rather than near the tip or near the crossguard for that matter. It's a really nice looking saber. There are certain variants of it with brass hilts that I really like. It has a really nice shape to the grip. For infantry officer sabers, I really like the M1837 from the Austrian Empire, and similar sabers such as, you know, the typical flank officer saber in Britain. All kinds of nations had similar sabers. I also like the Mameluke style and cavalry sabers of that kind as well. So the earlier 18th century Polish, Central European, Austrian, Hungarian cavalry sabers, I really like those as well. But for aesthetic reasons, I'd say the M1837. Now, from a functional standpoint, I like a bigger guard, of course, and I also don't like when the point of balance is way out from the guard, way forward. It's not that cool for fencing. Many people think that earlier types of sabers with stirrup hilts are way out with the point of balance, but it's actually very manageable. I say that even though I prefer these kinds of sabers, I still don't like it when it's too far out. So there you go. Okay, this next person asked me, could you do a video about your recommendations for saber trainers, waster, steel for beginners? Please could you also make a video about imperial moustache tips for beginners? Are you using a moustache trainer at night? So yeah, I could do a video about saber trainers for beginners, different materials, you know, buffers, foam, steel, nylon. Sure, I can do that. Keep an eye on the channel. I'll do that at some point. Oh, this next person said, that is a moustache any Hussar or Cossack would be envious of. Now that's great to hear. Here's a picture of my great-grandfather. Now you know where I got it from. This person said, everyone said what I was thinking, so how about moustache tips? Okay, so this person asked me, hi, do you have any examples from any memoirs of the use of the M1861, M1862 infantry sabers in combat? Especially some references to the Austrian Legion in Mexico would be interesting. Here's another quick thing from the edit. You might ask yourself, what about the Austrians at Mexico? That sounds kind of weird. And you'd be right, because other than the earlier branches of the Habsburg family who also ruled over Spain and, of course, the Spanish colonial empire, the later Austrian and Austro-Hungarian Empire was never a major player in 19th century colonialism. So nevertheless, in the 1860s, the younger brother of the reigning Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria-Hungary took up the crown of Mexico on the basis of a fake document that stated that the Mexican populace wanted him as a Habsburg emperor, and when in fact they weren't at all happy about it. So in 1867 it came to what's known as the Siege of Mexico City, where the Austrians there, of course with the support of Austria-Hungary and the French, who orchestrated this kind of whole Habsburg Emperor Mexico thing. They fought against the Mexican Republicans, and in the course of the events, Maximilian was killed, which was a personal tragedy for the Emperor of Austria-Hungary, Franz Josef. And this is also the basis for the question that I'm answering now about the Austrian Legion in Mexico and whether or not I know of any first-hand fighting accounts from that time. Okay, so I think you asked me this maybe 2 or 3 years ago already. Oh, 3 years. My channel has only been here for 3 years. Maybe you asked me that 1 year ago. And I did look into it at the time, but then I forgot about it again. And I do have a recommendation for you. Now, the Austrian National Library has a vast collection, it's ever growing, of Austrian newspapers, military newspapers, civilian newspapers, all kinds of newspapers and journals that they digitize and they put up in high resolution, searchable for free online. And just go to, I'll put the link down in the description, just go to anno.onb.ac.at. So anno stands for Austrian Newspapers Online. So it's the newspapers and journals section of the digital Austrian National Library. And you can just look for certain years and you can type in keywords and it will give you all the articles and journals with those keywords. So I tried it out just before filming the video. I'm typing in Sabre and Mexico, and there's a whole lot of stuff that the search engine found. So I'm recommending you have a look, and if you have any questions or don't understand anything because it's in German, hit me up, I can help you. Alright, so this person asked me, will you post more sparring footage frequently? They're always fun. Thanks, I'm glad you think so. They're always fun to do as well. Yes, I am. I'm going to post sparring footage whenever I get the chance to film. So yeah, you're going to see more sparring footage going forward. Sure, absolutely. Okay, so moving on. This person asked me, will there be a part 2 of the Habsburg discussion with the Lord Rivers? Okay, this is a nice question. I didn't expect that. I'll have to ask Lord Rivers what he says about that. For those who don't know, I did a kind of one-time podcast format, a discussion with fellow historian, reenactor, YouTuber. You can find him on Instagram, Lord Rivers. He's a really nice man. And yeah, I might as well ask him if he wants to do something again. Okay, so moving forward. The next viewer asked me, hello, do you know any saber systems that use passing footwork for movement? Okay, so now we have to define what is passing movement or passing footwork for that matter. Now, passing footwork is, let me show you with my hands. Passing footwork is like walking. You set one foot in front of the other, like this. Yeah. And usually in saber fencing, we do it linear. So this is my front foot, this is my back foot, and I move like this. Now, passing footwork is more like this. If I step out of the line in front of my front foot. So sometimes in saber fencing and also in small sword fencing, you see the front foot move behind the rear foot, but still staying and keeping the angle. So this one's still facing forward while this one is still facing to the side, as you can see. And this is sometimes called a slip, which is done for different purposes. I wouldn't call this a passing step per se, because usually in HEMA what we mean is that we actually change the direction and change the orientation of our body. So if I move forward like this, my body also rotates. Now, if I just do this, as I just showed, my orientation stays the same. So I'm going to assume you're talking about the change of orientation of the torso, the upper body, what I would call a true passing step, as we see in earlier systems. Yeah, well, every time we have to contend with polearms or disarming techniques, even in later sabers, in later sources such as military saber, in Roworth, for example, in the disarming and sword against bayonet sections, he actually recommends passing steps in order to, step in, grapple, grip the bayonet, grip the barrel, disarm the other person, grab their hilts and pull it away from them. So whenever you do stuff like that, in real combat situations, or for training, of course, you will see passing footwork, but in those later systems, you don't really see true passing footwork outside of those contexts. Now, if we go back to the earlier broadsword sources, it tends to become, in some cases, less linear. So if you have, in later systems, if you're pretty much at a 90-degree angle with your feet, yeah, like this, sometimes what you see in the earlier sources is that the rear foot is somewhat offset, which makes your body less streamlined towards the opponent and encourages other passing footwork. So what you see in those sources is a lot of traversing. Traversing is basically stepping in a circle. I might do a video on that as well now that I'm talking about it. So basically the traverse is, let me show you again, is not a passing step, but is moving like that in a circle. So you can leave the center line and follow with your foot, if you can see what I mean. Sorry for the hand thing, but I hope it's clear. Now the traverse aids in getting in a cut at a different angle, offset from your main line of attack. So if I do the traverse, I can not only hit you here, but I can hit you from that angle. So what you see is cut 3 or 4, so the ascending cuts from below, they can work really well with a traverse. So that's not really a passing step as well, but it's also not quite linear. But there's also stuff that goes more in the direction of true passing steps. For example, the German manual by Christmann, which is from the early 19th century. He does some footwork that actually uses the rear foot to step in, step off line for different reasons. I'm not an expert on that by any means. Go check out Oliver Jansep's channel in the description down below if you want to learn more about that. But this is also something that could count as a true passing step. But everything that we usually classify as saber fencing doesn't really have the old school, old style passing steps as a main means of attack or defense. Okay, moving on. What's your opinion on mixed weapon sparring? I do a lot of longsword versus saber, for example. I think it's really fun mixing up the weapons because you have to develop strategies for each different weapon pairing. For example, against longsword, I always try to go in and bind and target the hands. Yeah, makes sense. Long story short, I love mixed weapons. Now, mixed weapons, I think, is something that is historically relevant, if you want to look at HEMA that way. I think it's relevant because rarely do people who meet somewhere in a conflict situation, be it a civilian brawl or duel, be it a military context, rarely do people meet with the exact same weapon as their counterpart. So I do think trying different weapons and do mixed weapon sparring is not only useful, but it's also relevant and it's also a lot of fun. So some people say, why should I do saber versus longsword? They never met in real life. Well, didn't they? And also it's good fun. And it's also a way to highlight the different systems, how they work against each other and how they don't work against each other. Now, first off, it's great for distance management. So saber fencing against longsword, you're constantly at a disadvantage because the longsword has the longer reach most of the time, depending on what you're doing. But it's a great way to train defensively going in with the saber, which otherwise you maybe wouldn't so much. And another great thing about it is mismatched systems. So if someone doing, let's say, Lichtenauer or Meyer fencing with a saber, Dussakmesser, whatever, and they're used to cutting into your cut, this is something that you're absolutely not used to as a saber fencer, which drives me nuts regularly. It's still great to have that kind of experience to adapt and to learn and just having to deal with it. I think it's great fun. Okay, with this next one, there's quite a lot to unpack. This person says, serious questions. What are the best YouTube HEMA courses that provide high quality supplemental instruction outside of in real life classes? I'm too new to HEMA to make accurate judgments on who is good or who not. Okay, let's start with that one. There's a few things and a few people off the top of my head who I would recommend. So if you're interested in saber, no doubt about it, go to the Academy of Historical Fencing YouTube channel. Nick Thomas and Esther Gibson, they did a great introductory series to British military swordsmanship during the pandemic in 2020. You'll find it on the channel under playlists. I highly recommend that. Also, if you're interested in Christmann, German saber, go to Oliver Jansep's YouTube channel, which is also a great introduction to that kind of saber fencing. So he has a course on Christmann, which covers footwork and parries and all that kind of stuff, guards. So if you're interested in that, I highly recommend him as well. Now, it would be unfair not to mention Matt Easton's Scholar Gladiatoria, which is going to be obvious to everybody and their grandmother, but I'll recommend him as well. It's a channel that inspired me in my early HEMA days as well, so yeah, check him out. I'm also going to recommend Federico Malaguti from Italy. He's got a very interesting channel. He's mainly doing longsword and arming sword. So if you're into that, I highly recommend Federico as well. Now I'm also going to mention Martin of Schildwache Potsdam channel. He mainly focuses on side sword, but it's also a great instructional channel. So if you haven't heard of him, Schildwache Potsdam, highly recommend it as well. Now, two more channels off the top of my head. Russ Mitchell, he's a researcher and HEMA instructor, mainly focusing on saber and the Hungarian, Austrian side of things. He's got very interesting things to say, also going into depth with the theory behind fencing, body mechanics, systems, traditions. So I highly recommend Russ as well. And also a very high quality channel that I personally really enjoy is Daniel Pope. He's also a HEMA fencer and instructor from Australia in Victoria. He's mainly focused on Maya and Victorian saber fencing, so he covers a lot with that already, and I highly recommend his channel as well. I really do enjoy it. Now here's a bit of fun. This person also asked me a less serious question. Assuming all the worst possible outcomes come true in regards to climate change and society reverts to, say, 1800s tech, I hope not, at best, with wide areas of early medieval tech levels outside the rich areas, what's your daily carry weapon? What would you equip your community defense force with? And what would the general society's weapons of choice be? Firearms are possible, but consider supply chains and munition sourcing difficulties. Love your work. Thanks for all the good info on your channel. Thanks for watching. I'm glad you enjoy it. Now, first off, I hope we're never gonna have to live through that and everything's gonna be fine. But that's a bit of fun. What would I equip my defense force with? So I do think some kind of body protection is always great. So we don't have modern equipment. Let's say light breastplates is something that I would equip my people with. Something that's not too heavy, not too cumbersome, but maybe some kind of, I don't know, mail or maybe an actual plate. Something like that. And also I would choose a sidearm that is easy to carry, because that's worth a lot if you're moving around, staying outside all the time, you know, doing patrols and that kind of stuff. So I would choose probably something like a short saber or cutlass or hanger. That's easy to carry, not too long because it gets in the way while walking and sitting. So probably something like a hanger, I would say, like a short pioneer saber, something like that, or maybe even a large knife or a messer. Something like that would be great, I think. And probably also something like a helmet. One of the most useful pieces of protective gear in any kind of scenario, from motorbikes to knights and everything in between. So helmets, always good. And just look at what the town guards did in medieval times or in modern times. Like the typical town's guard outfit is what I think would work in any kind of scenario. So yeah, that's what I would choose. So this person asked me, what is the cheapest saber that handles correctly and you would recommend, preferably available in the EU? That's great because I don't really know a lot about other markets. So the cheapest saber is the Go Now foam buffers. I always recommend them. They're probably like 50 euros a piece. They don't handle correctly, but they do handle like a sword-like object or saber enough for the price and for the minimal protection and gear you need to fence with them. So have a look at those. Now, if you want to step it up a bit, say like a nylon sword, Black Fencer is something that I always recommend. It's a great company from Spain, available in the EU and via sellers as well, so other web shops. Sometimes they're in stock there. So this is something that will cost you just shy of 100 euros probably, and they handle really well for what they are. They don't handle like a sharp, but they do handle like the sword it's trying to represent. So Black Fencer nylon is something that I always recommend. And if we're talking about steel, I don't think we're talking cheap anymore. So for affordable, sensible steel options for sabres, I would go to VB Sword Shop, maybe also Black Fencer if you're into the earlier stuff. So those would be my go-to entry-level, cost-effective variants. You could also look to Krieger from Poland, Krieger Historical Weapons. They also do sabres now and have been for a while. Look at Regnier or look at Kwieten Armory or maybe Siggy if you have the money. Okay, here we go. This next person asks, hey, I would like you to give us the websites you buy your sabres on if it pleases you. I know Cult of Athena, but maybe you have a better option and I would love to hear them. Have a nice day. I usually buy my weapons from HEMA specific shops or stores. That's usually the makers' websites themselves. So Siggy Forge, Kwieten Armory, Black Fencer. There are some retailers like Black Armory, like Fetzdam, both from France. Some German sites as well, trainingsschwerter.de. So if you want a sharp, there's two from Cold Steel that I can somewhat recommend. It's the Shamshir, the newer one, and also the mortuary hilted broadsword, backsword. Those are good, not too overweight, and they cut like hell. So if you want a cutter, those options from Cold Steel are great as well. And you can sometimes find them off of Amazon, even in the EU. And also, if you want a sharp, I can wholeheartedly recommend the 1796 Light Cavalry Sabre by Windlass that they produced together with Matt Easton. So that's a great one as well. Now, if we're talking about antiques, this is a different story entirely, which I think goes beyond the scope of this video. So I hope that helps. So this next person asked me, is a rock in a sock a viable weapon of choice on a medieval battlefield? I'm not sure about the battlefield thing, but maybe you should ask Hans Thalhofer. Okay folks, so here we are at the end of the video. I hope I answered your questions to your liking. I hope it's been fun and entertaining. This has been quite a long video, so I'd appreciate it if you can tell me in the comments down below what you thought of this format, what I could change, what you liked about it and what you didn't like about it maybe. And also for the questions that I didn't answer, I might do separate videos about these because they are more in-depth and require me to do a little bit more of research as well. So off the top of my head, I couldn't really answer those properly for my own liking. You might just see them answered in a separate video. Also, the moustache questions. There's going to be a moustache video. So here we are. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next video and take care. Thanks so much and goodbye.